Hello and welcome back to another episode of Tash Teaches. I'm Tash, and in today's video I'd like to show you how you can use the note grid, wavetable LFO and curves to create some rather beautiful melodic generators, and it's going to sound a little something like this. I've loaded up a note grid here, and the first thing I'm going to do is delete the note in module. So I've just got the note out now. Next, I'm going to take, let's start with, say, a wavetable LFO. And I'm going to put this into an oscilloscope, because I always love to be able to see what kind of waveforms we're dealing with here. And I'm maybe going to select 2 bars. So let's make this a 2-bar sine wave. Also, I'd like for this LFO to re-trigger to its start point whenever I press play. So I'm going to take a transport playing, I'm going to turn off note trigger, re-trigger, and I'm going to take this transport in, and you'll see that if I press start a bunch of times, it will always go back to the beginning. That's going to serve us quite nicely for what I want to do. Now, what I would like to now take is for the ability for this LFO to be the pitch information for this synth afterwards. Right now we don't have any form of gating as well, so for the hell of it I'm also just going to take a gates, let's just use a triggers actually. I'm going to take a triggers and I want to have 16th notes just playing through. So as soon as I patch this in and press play, now we've got that 16th note pattern coming through. And if I were to just patch this pitch information directly in, right now we're going to end up with a rather horrible sound. And that is, of course, because the pitch information that it's receiving goes all the way from 0, in this case that would probably be C3, all the way up to the highest possible pitch, which I believe is, it's a G8. So we need to scale this down into something a bit more usable. So I'm going to take a pitch scaler, and I'm going to put that on here. When I'm working on patches like this, I find it incredibly useful to use a lot of oscilloscopes, and I find that that just really helps you to understand sort of what's happening every step of the way. So I can now see that this value has been scaled down sufficiently to just 1 octave. Let's listen to what we've got. Still sounds pretty shit, and that's because of the fact that, as you can see here, these sine waves that we're using as pitch information are super smooth moving. If I were to take this and put this as a square wave, you would see that we would now at least have a fixed value. But because we've got those smooth lines there, we're going to need to find a way to grab the pitch at any specific time of a trigger and hold that pitch until the next trigger. In this case it's 16 notes, so we're going to be sampling a pitch every 16th. And the way that we're going to do that is by using a sample and hold. So if I now take this out of here, and I take the gate input, or the gate signal that we're using to trigger the actual envelope of the instrument, and we use that to pick the pitch in any given moment. Now if I scale this back, and let's take another oscilloscope now, you'll be able to see that now we're getting that pitch as a sort of scaled value. It's being quantized. Now, what would also be quite a good idea is to, because we've got the ability for this note grid to have post effects, I'm going to take a key filter, and that means that instead of having to use the quantize module in here, which is a little bit more finicky, we can't just pick a key, I quite like using this post effects quantize here. And we can actually now see that this, we're having a bit of an issue with the pitch. So what I'd also like to do is say, let's take all of these and let's take these values and make them into semitones. So if I now attach this after here, you can see that if we were to zoom in massively, you still can't really see it. Maybe if I increased this, you'd be able to see it. We're now basically taking that pitch signal, and every single one of those like half between notes now gets taken and put into being a specific semitone. And then after that semitone, we're picking whichever random it was. If I take this off, once again, we're getting that bit of a weird wobbliness. So now that we've selected that, what's quite cool is if we were to change the tempo of or change the timing of this LFO, if I make this 4 bars now, we're going to have a longer pattern. That's all very well. We've been able to do this for ages. So why don't we take a slightly more interesting LFO, maybe this symmetrical fractal. I'm also going to turn it off interpolation so I can just jump between values, and let's see what this feels like. If we put this to 2 bars. Oh, I quite like that. That's very cool. Now, what I'd really like to do with this is to create a sort of arpeggiator where each one of these voices is being sent, each one of these successive pitches is being split equally between, say, 4 voices. And the way that I'm going to do that is by first getting rid of this triggers. In fact, no, we'll keep that triggers. This can be our basis for it. And I want to close this up, and I want to make 4 pitch outs. So let's shove that in there. And every single one of these will, of course, being fed the same pitch information. But I'd like to make some subtle changes as we go along. So before that, let's just figure out a way to distribute the gate signal to the individual voices. Because instead of, currently now we have, if I were to change the pitch of this, you know, if I was to unplug this, those pieces are, every single one of these voices is getting every single one of these 16th notes. So I'd actually like to take a split module, and I'm going to take this 16th note value here. Let's keep that in there for the pitch sample and hold. And I'm going to take this and make it into a 4 output situation. Then I'm going to take a counter, and I'm going to make this 4 because there are 4 in here, making sure to change this to nearest because we don't want to be blending between gate values. We just want 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to take the output of this counter, and I'm going to patch that into this import here, the select in, and I'm going to take the same gate signal we're using to distribute to use as the sort of counter. You can now see that right now we're only getting the first beat. You can also see as I'm pressing stop, we're not necessarily always starting at the same place again. So why don't we put down here this transport playing to reset this counter, which now means that every time we start again, I need to make sure that we start back at 0 here. Let's, why is that happening? That's very strange. Let's just take a trigger in, actually. We'll just use that for now. Okay, now that trigger allows us to, at any point, restart it back to the beginning of that sequence. So we're always starting at 1. I'm now going to take this gate, and I'm going to put that into this value. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to put that into this, and I'm going to take this, and I'm going to put that into, that. Now we've evenly distributing, just the same as we had before, but each one of these now has the ability for us to change the pitch before it happens. So if I were to take a transpose module now, and I were to put this after, say, the 3rd voice, I can make just the 3rd iteration an octave up. Which is kind of fun, and we don't necessarily have to just do octaves. Why don't we do a 3rd? Kind of cool. We could also do maybe a 7th. Really cool. I'd just like to take a moment to shout out our sponsor this week, me, Tash Teaches. If you'd like to book a one-to-one lesson with me so that I can help you with your music production, be it in Ableton or Bitwig, or perhaps help coach you on your creative mindset so that you can live a freer life as an artist, then book a lesson with me from the link calendly.com/tashteachers that you'll see in the description down below. In the meantime, let's get back to the video. Now, what I'd also like to do is to find a way to make some slightly more subtle changes to this LFO before it gets set into the pitch information. So I'm actually going to just duplicate this, and I'm going to replace this wavetable LFO. I don't know, I'll keep the wavetable LFO for now. But I'm going to take this output, and I'm going to, by holding Shift, you can see down below in this window here that anytime I overlay or I hover over something in the grid, it will give you modifiers. And if I hold Shift, it will add a blend in. Right now we're blending the same signal twice. So right now we have exactly the same signal, but if I were to change this by, say, making... Now we have a blend, an equal blend between this waveform and this square wave. If I were to change the tempo of this, make that into, say, 3/4 notes, you can see that we now have a slightly more interesting pattern. I don't necessarily have to keep it 50% blend. I can go back to just being this one, or I can go all the way to this one. Super cool. And for the hell of it, I'm also just going to bring the transpose back. And I want to find a slightly more interesting wavetable LFO, something a bit wonkier. Maybe let's take this shit horn, and I'm going to put that back to 1. Maybe let's make this into a bar. Let's see what would happen if we just use this. Also, because this transport playing is just a totally high gate all the time, we could use, say, a step sequencer. And let's get rid of that, and let's make it so that that means that we'll at least have the ability to pick how often we want to restart the pattern. Because if we had a 5-bar pattern here, let's take this for example, let's make this like 17. It may feel a bit wonky to the listener, and we may want to have that sort of wonkiness, but say, well, restart it every bar. So I'm just going to put one high note at the beginning of this step sequencer, and if I turn this back on, now you can see that this trigger at the beginning of the steps module is restarting that pattern. But we might want to be able to change the actual speed that this is happening. So let's also just take the phase in module, and we're going to turn off the phase pre-chord so that we can control it. I'm going to take the phase scaler, and I'm going to take a phase reset, which will just reset the phase signal every time I press play. So let's take that transport playing, and we're going to use that as our signal to reset it. So now, if we have a look at what we have a faster pattern, and that's because this is now double the phase. If I wanted this to be just 1 bar, quite cool. I can now increase the denominator and make it 2 bars. Maybe we also don't want to have just a straight 16th note pattern. So I'm going to take another triggers module here, and we're going to make a sort of Euclidean rhythm by taking the clock quantize, and we're going to patch that to triggers, and then we're going to take the output of this and use this as our information. Also, fun little trick here. If I want to move everything that's coming out of here, because I don't want to have to rewire it again, if I just double click and drag, I can drag all of the outputs to there. I'm going to use the 16th value to be our clock source. I'm also going to take the output of this step sequencer to use that to reset our counter every time. And now this means that if I were to change the top value here to something like now I can have a slightly more interesting pattern. I'm just going to bring the scaler down so that we can go from a C2. I'm going to make this a bit slower or a bit faster. And there's no reason that we have to just stay with one blend module here. We could say let's move this back. So irritating that you can't just grab hold of it. Oh, come on you. I'm going to take another sort of sequence. I'm going to use the curves module actually, because this will allow me to actually create something from scratch and just draw in my form. And I'm going to take this blend module here and I'm going to blend that again. So now we have a double blend. If I put this all the way to the right, quite cool. Let's see if I were to make some changes to this. Let me make this into a bar, or a half note. Oh, I quite like that. Of course, we can go back here and make some changes to these transpose. Why don't we do, say, 3 up on... We can do -2 on this one. And let's go down a fifth. Or a fifth an octave down. Quite nice. I'd like to do something quickly just to make it so that the pitch values of the notes, the key tracking is doing something interesting. So let's make it, let's put a sort of relative key track on here, and I'm going to make it so that in theory the higher notes are longer. Quite so extreme there. Could maybe use the same envelope. Might go the other way actually, so the low notes. That's nice. Now let's make some changes again to this waveform, because we have now the entirety of the pitch information is coming from this one curves module. If we now start to blend this back in, now the output is going to be blended between these two. So if I take just the first output, kind of cool. Let's drag this up, and I'm going to take a minimum and a maximum, and I'm going to take the output of this blend module, and I'm going to take the output of this curves module. Let's take another oscilloscope so we can see what's going on. So this is the minimum value, and this is the max value. Quite cool. Okay, so I'm going to take a sample and hold, and I'm going to take the output of this clock quantize, and I'm going to use that, if we put a attenuator after it, and let's also put a bias after that so that we can wiggle this value around. I'm going to use this for the velocity of these notes. So I'm just going to patch that into there. This means I can attenuate it down, but then I can actually bring the overall velocity up. Which means that if I now map some things to velocity, so let's take an envelope of sorts, and we're going to use this envelope to open up the skew. But we're going to only have those open on a slightly higher velocity. Why don't we also blend in to this signal a sample and hold LFO, just so that we can get a little bit of randomness coming in. Let's patch that into there so we can see what we're getting. Let's change key as well. Let's go for something like, say, an A flat minor. And I'm also going to just change up some of these wavetables. So let's take high harmonics for the top one. Let's find something simpler for the bottom, happy jitters perhaps. And I can also, because of the fact that we're resetting this every time, I can make these a slightly strange time. So let's do 2.75. And on here, let's make this into, say, three half notes. So we've got a slightly longer signal now. It's also important to note that if I don't like the size of the information coming in here, of course I've got my pitch scaler, but further than that I can then attenuate that signal. If I want the actual signal to be smaller going into the pitch scaler. In this case I'm going to bring it back up to what it was. this to something like... I'm going to go the other way again with the key track. Let's find a different curve to use here. Why don't we try this Holy Stupa? If I bring this scalar back down to 1, then we're going to get a more repeating pattern, which can be quite beneficial when you're coming up with sort of art patterns like this. It's also very possible, now that you've created this, to take a new MIDI channel and take the output of the note grid. So if you want to be able to actually record these things that are happening, you can then have that repeatable pattern there, and then anything you do up here will of course be reflected in that MIDI recording. So if I change this to being, say, a 13 note, and I'm going to do that up a 7th, up a 5th, I'd also like for there to be some sort of skew modulation on here. Let's make this really fast. Make this per voice maybe. We can also make it so that the speed of this LFO is adjusted by the key tracking. Let's put a reverb on it. Sidechain, take from the kick to add a bit of side chaining. We'll take that, kick in, bring the volumes down. Let's make some changes. If I put this on bipolar, we're going to get a bigger signal, which means we're going to be ending up with far more low notes, especially if I blend some of this guy in. Ooh. Take a random modulator, and we're going to do note and hold. So we're going to make every single one of these have a slightly different decay. Let's have a different release as well. Let's also do a different filter envelope for the decay, different release. Maybe a different bit of... Let's find a different pattern. Let's go for going low. Oh, I like that. If I were to now duplicate this instrument, find a different sound to use. I've got a nice pad that I created the other day. I think it's called Beautiful Mood. Let's see. Oh, that's not what I want. Beauty Mood. Beautiful Mood. Mood. Creator. Let's have a look. Oh, I'm not looking for favorites, that's why. This browser is so slow. I have honestly no idea why mine seems to be just misbehaving as much as it is. Okay, lovely. We've got our delicious sound here. This one I'd quite like for the notes to be slower, so I'm going to map the bottom value to 8 here, and I'm going to do say a 5 into 8. And I'd also like for by default to have a slightly higher value here. So let's listen to what it sounds like just with the two of them playing exactly the same pattern. Might be interesting to maybe change up some of these guys. You can see how delicious it is, just layering these things up and getting... Maybe on this one we can change some of these values. I'm going to go up an octave. Let's go up an octave and a third. Let's go up a ninth. Or I guess that's a sixth. Let's change what we've got here for the blend mode. We could also make a sort of bass line out of this. Let's just call this pluck. This is our pad, and this is our bass. So I'm going to take this instrument and make it into a mono pad. Shut up. Take this into a mono instrument. In fact, let's just start from scratch with this. So let's take a poly multiple C. Okay, let's bring this down an octave. Let's make it mono. Let's see what we've got if we straight away, let's put all of these pitches back to 0. And let's change this up to something like maybe this increasing triangles. Let's make this into 4 bars. And let's make something, what have we got here towards the end? Maybe not jitters. Let's go for this phase distortion. That could be quite cool. And we'll start with something towards the beginning. And let's see what we've got straight off the bat. I'm going to mute the other two. Take a note counter and we'll make it so that every 3 we're sort of increasing this EG. See what it sounds like with the pluck. I'm going to change this curve down here to something different as well. Let's go for maybe the inverted shark fins. Let's make this 4, so we've got I'm also going to bring in a previous version of this that I made in another project to see what that sounds like as we bring it in. Straight away because I think it's in the wrong key. What key did we go for here? G sharp minor. Let's have a look. Start bringing in this other version. And again, it's just the same concept. Super nice. I get rid of these and we'll just have the original sin. Bring it up an octave. I were to change this to be just 3 notes, then of course we're going to have a slightly more polymetric feel. Into using just clicks for audio lately. I've always been an audio person, but I really enjoy just being able to add into a clip like that. Just making a clip and then dragging something in. Let's make this super tight. I think in theory as well, if I were to take, let's mute that motherfucker, because she keeps going, that's for sure. If I were to take, on the project level, a macro, and I'm going to use this macro in every single one of these instruments to wherever the pitch information is coming out. So right here, I'm going to take, before the bisemitone, I'm going to take a transpose modulator, and I'm going to map this to the transpose by, say, 12 steps, 12 semitones. Then I'm going to go to the pad, I'm going to do the same thing. Let's just move all that forward. Take the transpose again. Same old thing. Got 2 more instruments. We've got the bass. Where's our pitch here? Again, we've got to put it before the semitone because otherwise, we get wonky numbers. So let's just map that to that, 12, put it back to whatever it was, and on the pluck. This is what I love about the global modulators, is being able to do small things like this. So we are almost ready to rock and roll. Let's map this guy there. And now we have total control across the project. If I make this bipolar as well, now I can go up or down 12. So if we had a quick listen to what we've got. I can now bring everything down. I'm going to get rid of these drums just so we can listen. If I put a really slow LFO, actually on this pitch information, now we can end up with these really fantastic, long, related patterns. Let's bring a decay on here. For the hell of it, why don't we take a random modulator and we're going to just, in different amounts over the space of say 2.57 bars, change the step count here. That's going to give us some really strange and wild results. The Euclidean rhythm that's being created on every single one of these instruments is different. Let's also take a random. I can change the amount of this and make this 6 for all of these, because then we have a slightly smaller range of motion. I'm going to put this on hertz, and I'm going to just fucking wobble with this transpose. I I suppose I'm going to want to do a bisemitone after this as well. It's behaving quite weirdly. Let's make... Is that the one that's polymetric? Let's do it. Just 16th notes. Sync. Let's not do that. That doesn't seem to be... Oh, right. I see. It was on the wrong one. Just a small change, I think. We probably don't need to go up that high, because that really does sound god-awful. Let's get rid of both of those. One thing we could do as well is limit the... So it's not just being put into G sharp minor. Let's put this to A minor on every single one of these. Just so... Actually, no, let's just get rid of these key filters. And let's make it restricted into something a little more modal. And by that I mean, let's take wherever the last bit of pitch information is coming out of here, which is this, I do believe. Let's take, oh god, you're slow motherfucker. Let's take the quantize module, and I'm going to pick a sort of interesting 5-note scale. So let's do, or a 6-note scale. I'm going to take that. Let's now go to our bass. Let's take the same information. So you now need to go out of here. You need to go out of there. And let's move on over to the pad. And the final guy is this character here. Take it out of there, pitch you into there, and let's see what this sounds like now. And he thinks that there's still something pitchy happening that shouldn't be. Can't quite... Oh, it's because of these fucking transpose modules. Right. Let's go back and let's just ensure that there is no transposition happening. Let's go back to the bass. I don't think there's any on the bass. That's good. And then we just have the last one, the pluck. It's okay, I suppose, to do octaves. Let's see what this sounds like now. Let's slow down the tempo massively. Ooh, that's beautiful. For some reason I always forget to do slow notes. I come from such a house music background that I end up doing everything at 120, and then I slow it down and I go, oh, that's delish. Like if I slow this down massively, let's do a little recording. RC20 on here, get a little bit of wobble, some noise. curious to see what happens if we make this into a sort of 5-note scale. I'm going to take... Just a little recording. If I go and change in this amount here, these to all 12 again. Had a bit of delay. Add that to the bass. Well folks, that's sadly all we have time for today, but I do hope that this video has been useful. If you enjoyed it, then please remember to like, comment and subscribe, and click that notification bell too if you'd like to be instantly aware of my latest uploads. In the meantime, happy Saturday and happy creating!